Good morning. So here we are. It is Friday, November 6th, and we are starting up our third unit today. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to start going, I'm trying to get the glare off my glasses so you guys can actually see my eyes, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So anyway, we are going to be starting Unit 3 today. We are now done with Unit 2. We're moving on to bigger and better things, and finally getting into some stuff that's real biology, which is what I'm looking forward to. So here we are in Schoology. We are now going into our yellow folder right here, Unit 3 cells. Now, I may or may not have a whole bunch of stuff listed here. Don't worry about that. I'm getting that organized. What we're going to be looking at is right here. Week number 1 from the 5th, which was yesterday, but we did test yesterday, whatever, till the 13th. So that's till the end of next week. All right, that's going to be our week 1. And in here, today we're going to do a little bit of cells right here for the PowerPoint. I'm going to talk about the cell bubble lab in a second video. And if you're in here in person, you started the cell bubble lab yesterday. If you haven't been in yet, you're going to start it on Monday. For the people who aren't going to be in because you're choosing to stay virtual, no problem. I've got you covered too. And inside this cell membrane folder, you'll find a video related to the whole lab, but I'll go over that in another video. Let's take a look at cells because we've now done the basics of science. We've now covered what the 4 organic molecules are, how enzymes work, all that basic foundational stuff, which means now we get to move on to the actual really interesting things, which means now we get to talk about how life works, the goal of this class. So, you guys know me by this point. I like my jokes, my comics, my memes. This is just a single-celled organism being anxious about stuff. This one's really interesting. If you've never done the math on it, it's really kind of an impressive thing to do. This says a sneeze droplet can have 200 million germs. Hand sanitizers just about all say that they kill 99.9% of germs. But that means that 0.01% of them survive. So what happens if you take 200 million and you multiply it by 0.01. That means that that's still how many bacteria or germs are left on your hands after using hand sanitizer. And there should be another 0 there. My calculator just isn't that good. Yeah. Still, 2 million survivors, even with a 99.9% kill rate. All right, so let's get into cells. Now, as all of you are probably aware, cells are our basic unit of structure and function. That is one of our cell theory parts. So what happened was when people were discovering the cell, they started to put together these rules, these laws, that they really felt would help other people to understand how important cells were and what they did. And as time passes, kind of coalesced, came together into what we call our cell theory. So this is composed of 3 different parts. The first one, all living things are composed of cells. Nothing new. We had this in our 8 characteristics of life. Second, what I just said, cells are the basic unit of structure and function. And that means that anything that a cell does, anything that you do in your entire body has to start from a cellular level. It's not something that you do, it's something that your cells need to do. And obviously, if we have something built in ourselves, it has to be from cells as well. And then finally, this one may seem like just like common sense, duh, but believe it or not, it took us a long time to get here. And that is this idea that new cells come from existing cells. So that means that if something grows somewhere, it had to come from something that was already there. Believe it or not, for very long time, especially in Europe, people believed some pretty wacky things about where life came from. They believed in what's called spontaneous generation, and that living things would just pop into being. And it actually literally took experiments to prove them wrong so that we could get where we are now. They used to believe that mice came from old, sweaty clothes that were left with pieces of food in them. There are recipes. You can look it up. Now, this is what we think of when we think of the word cell, right? You can see all these bits and pieces in there. This is a living thing. This is the simplest, smallest living thing. All cells come in two types. They're either going to be what we call prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Now, prokaryotic cells, don't worry, this has all the same stuff. Yeah. Prokaryotic cells are basically just bacteria. They're the only living example of prokaryotic cells that's left. They're really, really simple, but they have an advantage in being very, very simple. It means they're also very tough. And they're capable of reproducing very quickly. Now, for this, I always like to compare these two things, a rock and a cell phone. That's my boyo. All right, so which one of these is simpler? Hopefully you say the rock. It has nowhere near the number of electrical components and different pieces this has. If I start subjecting both of these, let's say I submerge them in acid, I hit them with a hammer, I do all sorts of things to them, which one's going to break first and stop being able to do that which it does? Well, the cell phone will, obviously, far more fragile. If I want to make more, which one is easier to make more of? Well, the rock is. You just hit the rock with a hammer and you get more rocks. All right, bacteria are the rock. They are super simple, but that means that they are hard to kill. They reproduce very rapidly. They are simple. Simple things are not bad. Simple things are very tough. Complex things can break all sorts of different ways. If a computer dies, there's a lot of possibilities for where in that computer something went wrong. Pretty hard for a rock to die, if you know what I mean. Now, what does this mean? This means that, let's say that you come to school one day, and wow, this example is going to be really on the nose for the COVID pandemic that we're going through now, but whatever, we're going to roll with it. So you come to school, right? You spend the day, you head home. Unbeknownst to you, you picked up 2 bacteria, right? Just 2 bacteria that you breathed in, you touched something and transferred it to your mouth, whatever, they got in you now. Now you're fine. You don't feel bad. The rest of the evening goes by, don't feel bad. You go to sleep, you don't feel bad. You sleep for, let's say you're the average teenager that only gets about 6 hours of sleep. You should get a lot more. But let's imagine the average 6. So what happens in those 6 hours? Well, those 2 bacteria will multiply over and over and over again. See, bacteria will double their number just about every 20 minutes when they're in a good condition. So now, by the time you wake up, you don't have 2 bacteria, you have millions. And now you feel terrible, absolutely sick. If you've ever had that happen, that's because you got into a fight with a prokaryote. Prokaryotic cells do not have any internal organelles. For the most part, they've got technically these little ribosomes, which we'll talk about, but really the key is they don't have a nucleus. And that's how we can identify them. Because even with a very poor microscope, you can look and say, yeah, there's no nucleus there. Because they do not have all of these more advanced pieces, they cannot form multicellular organisms. So everything that's big enough to see without a microscope is going to be made of eukaryotic cells, like us. Now, our eukaryotic cells are really named so because we do have a nucleus. We can observe the nucleus. We also have all these other bits and pieces on the inside of our cells that give our cells the ability to do things that prokaryotes cannot. And that is really, really useful. You can find all types of really cool eukaryotic cells. These are diatoms. Diatoms make a glass case around themselves. And believe it or not, they were the first toothpaste. People would take what's called diatomaceous earth, which is dirt full of dead diatoms in their little glass shells. And that's what we would scrub our teeth with. And their little glass skeletons would scrape the plaque off of our teeth. People then decided that, oh, that's kind of gross. So they put plastic in our toothpaste instead. We've got things like a euglena. These are really neat because these are the only animals that legitimately do photosynthesis on their own. They have chloroplast like a plant, but they are an animal. There are other animals that make use of photosynthesis, but in which case they're not doing it. They have algae that like lives inside them and does it for them. This one is actually doing it themselves. And then we got stuff like amoebas, which are hunters. They've made horror movies about gigantic amoebas flowing down roads and eating people. Keep in mind, even at the simplest level, we went over this with our 8 characteristics of life, even if it's just one cell, it is considered alive. It is made of cells. It qualifies. Now, in order for something to be a multicellular organism, it just means multi, many. So many cells have to come together and make something new. The simplest is this. This is called a hydra. Lives in fresh water. You can find them out in the Shenango River. And that is a multicellular organism. Now, next week, we're going to start talking about the organelles. We're going to start going into all of the different things, starting with the cell membrane, which will be our first lab we're working on this week and early next week. So I hope to see everybody today. I hope that this wasn't too stressful and that you'll join me for class. Have a great day and a good weekend if I don't see you.